Okay, so I got a question from one of the members of my locals.com community, which is at afreshperspective.locals.com. And he had some questions for me about what I think of the Daunte Wright shooting. And I've talked about this in other videos, but he had a few different questions, so I wanted to answer them one by one. So first question is, what are your thoughts regarding the shooting and the how and why it happened? Um, to me, when I watched the video, I think, I know the facts of the case. They pulled him over because of expired tags, expired registration. After they pulled him over, they found out that he had a warrant for his arrest, related to a case in which he is accused of robbing somebody at gunpoint. He made bail on that, but he hadn't yet gone to trial, and so he had violated the terms of his bail. So that's why the warrant was issued. And when he realized that he was about to be arrested again, he resisted and he was trying to flee. He tried to get back in his car and try to drive off so he didn't get arrested. Obviously, you shouldn't resist arrest. Anybody who listens to my content knows how I feel about that. It's a bad idea because it can end up very badly, just like it did in this case. They were trying to subdue him, and Officer Kim Potter was one of the officers trying to restrain him, and she pulled her gun and she was shouting taser, 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 and she was yelling at him saying, "I'll tase you, I'll tase you." And then she pulled the trigger. It fired one bullet, and he tried to drive off after that. And after she shot him, she says, "Oh shit, I shot him." And he tries to drive off, but he dies from his wounds. And that was pretty much the end of the story at that point. I do believe that the shooting was accidental. I don't think it makes sense to assume that she was pretending to think that she had her taser when she was clearly shouting that "I'm going to tase you." It was gross incompetence, especially for a 25-year veteran on the force. It doesn't really make sense that she made that mistake, but people do make mistakes. Doesn't mean that she shouldn't be held accountable, though. Question 2, how do you grade the local police and city officials on their response and handling of this tragedy? So far, I mean, obviously, other than the shooting itself, I'm going to talk about the aftermath here. She immediately resigned, so they didn't have to fire her. I don't know what they would have done if she hadn't resigned. I'm sure they would have fired her, which is appropriate. Whether you agree that she should be charged with a crime or not, it is appropriate that she lose her job. And the police chief came out. He said that he believed it was an accident. He gave the details of the case. It seemed like he was being pretty open and honest about it. It didn't take them long to charge her. They charged her with second-degree manslaughter, which means that she could be facing a sentence of up to 10 years. So far, I don't really see any reason for complaint. And I'm talking about after the fact. I'm sure that there were other issues, other mistakes that they could have made that led to this incident. But as far as how they handled it afterward, I'm not seeing any serious problems here. Question number 3, what are your thoughts regarding the rioting and looting that is occurring in the local area? Not to confuse that with the folks who are protesting in a lawful and civil manner. Good, yeah. And we shouldn't lump the rioters in with the people who are actually protesting peacefully. I am all for peaceful protest, even if I don't agree with the premise of that protest. What do I think about the rioting? I mean, I hate the rioting. It's ridiculous. Rioting rarely solves any problems. We saw what happened last summer. They rioted all last summer and almost to the end of the year over George Floyd, and also, Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery too, as well. They did all that rioting and looting, destroying businesses, many of which were Black. And in those Black communities, they will be dealing with the repercussions from that rioting for years, possibly even over a decade. That's what happened with the LA riots. That's why I don't like them. People think that after the news stops covering it or after the rioting stops, then everything's hunky-dory. That's not the case. It causes immense economic damage. People go out of business. They lose their livelihoods. This whole thing where they say, oh, well, they've got insurance, so it's okay. That's not true. 40% of small businesses don't have any insurance. And most of the rest of the ones that do have insurance, they don't have enough to cover something like this. And if you look at Black-owned businesses, which are already at a disadvantage, it's devastating. That's what they won't talk to you about. That's what the left-wing activist media won't tell you, because they don't care about Black people. So yeah, I'm not down with rioting or looting. Peaceful protesting, yes, but the rioting and looting, so far, I haven't seen any change that is positive. I've seen cities like mine defund their police departments, cut their budgets. It's not going to do anybody any good. And the people who say they want to safeguard Black lives, this is going to end up costing more Black lives. When you have fewer police on the streets and fewer people who are able to protect and serve the good officers, you open Black people up to being more susceptible to these types of crimes. I think it's one of the reasons why Black gun ownership has gone up so drastically. It's because of the lockdowns, yeah, but it's also because of the riots. Media won't tell you that either. They'll just say, well, no, actually, I will say that the left-leaning media outlets that I have read about this have been fairly honest about it, so I won't blast them there. But you have to look at what it's accomplished. Has any meaningful legislation been passed in any of these cities that would hold officers accountable when they overstep their boundaries? No, none. And I don't think any will come of it. That may happen in the future, but it's not going to be because of these riots. There is no net gain from these riots. 4, how do you assess the narratives driven by the liberals and the mainstream conservatives? I'll start with the conservatives. I mean, you've seen me talk about this a lot, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But if you watch my YouTube channel, you know what I think about the right-wing narrative. It's trash. It's ridiculous. And when I'm talking about well, actually, let me just back up on that. Most conservatives are condemning what Officer Potter did. So that's positive. I'm not going to pretend like what I'm about to say applies to most conservatives. But when it comes to the conservative ink types, the authoritarian right, their messaging is abhorrent. They are doing the triple D method that I talk about. They are defending the officer. They're trying to distract from what she did, and they are trying to dehumanize Daunte Wright. They're doing all three of those things. Now, the first one, defend, they're not doing too much because it's impossible to defend what she did. It's impossible to defend the mistake that she made. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still some out there trying to defend what she did. Brandon Tatum, Mark Dice have both said that she shouldn't face any consequences because it was an accident. And they try to pin the blame on Daunte Wright because he shouldn't have resisted arrest. But what they're missing, what they don't want you to think about, is the fact that him resisting arrest does not justify the mistake that Potter made. So yeah, the messaging is horrible. They're digging up his criminal history. They started that late yesterday, and they're really talking about it. They were talking about it a lot today, and this is an effort to dehumanize him, so that you don't see him as a person. You don't see him as an actual life that mattered. You just see him as a thug. So while you might be against what the state did, you don't really care that much because they want you to believe that he is the epitome of evil, and we shouldn't care about him dying. We shouldn't care about the fact that the state took a life unjustly. It's part of their strategy. So that's what I'll say about the messaging from the right. From the left, it's the usual. Everybody's racist. Now, there is no evidence of racism in this case. There's no evidence that racial animus caused her to mistake her taser for a gun. That's not a thing. But progressives don't care. They love racism. They love it. You guys have heard me say that. These so-called progressives, these hard leftists, Marxists, they love racism. They love all kinds of bigotry because it's a political weapon. They love racism like a samurai loves his katana blade. Not because they just like racism, it's because they can weaponize it. And they are exploiting this case to weaponize it against the police and against white folks. And the thing is that a lot of white conservatives give them the ammo to do that. But the bottom line is, yeah, the left is going to say that this was based on race with no evidence. They don't care about evidence, and they're going to use it to promote their agenda. They want it to be to where if you disagree with them, they can label you as a racist. And that's the only reason they care about this. They don't care about Daunte Wright. They don't care about his family. They don't care about Black lives. This doesn't apply to everybody on the left. I'm talking about the activist media figures. I'm talking about the influencers. I'm talking about the politicians. A lot of them, they don't really care. So last question. As a prominent grassroots Black conservative writer and commentator, can you sum up how we can address and limit these tragedies in the future? The only way to do that is for serious-minded conservatives to gain control of the Republican Party. The authoritarians and the people who aren't really serious, the people who are just there to grift or to engage in performative politics, they can't have sway. They can't have the sway that they have right now because none of them actually care about this stuff. And we already know that the hard left doesn't care about any of this stuff. Democrats have had these cities, have control of these cities for decades, and they haven't done anything to decrease police brutality. I think it's going to take both white and Black conservatives to start being the adults in the room, stop valuing narrative over truth, and we have to say, you know what? There's an issue here. We may not agree that every cop is racist and that they're just mowing down innocent Black people in the street every day. But we do see that there is a disproportionality here when it comes to police brutality. And they need to see that just because it's happening to Black people doesn't mean that it won't happen to you too. Because look at what's happening with COVID. You've got police officers engaging in excessive force because people weren't wearing their masks outside, or they were violating COVID rules. We need to understand that the appropriate response to these issues is not to immediately defend the police. When they deserve it, yeah, you defend the hell out of them. But in cases like Kim Potter, she doesn't deserve to be defended. We need people who are willing to be adults about this, have rational conversations, and actually put forth solutions. So the response shouldn't be, well, the left is doing that, or the left is pushing this narrative. No, you're not going to solve anything that way. And the people who only focus on that are not serious about solutions. They're just serious about complaining about the left. Yeah, call them out. I'm not saying don't call out the hard left. I do all the time. We need to call them out, but we need to come to the table again as adults and actually think, what can we actually do to solve this problem? But for that to even happen, we need to have people in power. Like I said, the Democrats are not interested. Now, if we want to, and some are, there are Democratic politicians who actually want to make a difference, can work with those people too. We can work across the aisle, but we need people in positions of power first who actually want to solve these problems. We're not going to get anywhere until the Republican Party starts engaging with Black voters at the local level, especially. We need to get Republicans elected on city council as mayor, sheriff, or what have you, local offices at the state level too. We can't really have much of this conversation until we actually start making that happen. But while these people are running, if they're getting support from their local GOP and the national GOP and the state GOP, then we can push candidates who actually have solutions so that when they're running, they can go into the community and say, look, this has been going on for 50, 60, 70 years. Nothing's changed. Here is exactly what I'm going to do to fix this problem of police brutality, to hold people accountable. We can't be afraid to lean into holding police officers accountable, because when you don't do that, when you have these bad apples who get off, they make the rest of the police force look bad. They're one of the reasons why Black people are afraid of the police, because these people know that they don't have to worry about being punished. Like I said, at the most, they'll lose their jobs. And the numbers of the percentages of officers who actually get convicted and actually see jail time after they're convicted is very low. It's like 30%. So we need to come with the solutions, and we need to start taking this stuff seriously. We need serious people running, not people who are just running for clout. We need good people on board. And I think that that's starting to materialize. I think there's going to be more and more people who are just tired of the games and frankly are tired of losing. We need to win, and this will help us win. So I hope that answers your questions. But if you have more, put them in the locals.com community. If any of you have questions that you would like me to answer in video form like this, I'll have to think of a name for this type of segment or whatever, like questions for Jeff, or I don't know. I'll figure it out. But if you have questions, then subscribe. Subscribe to my locals.com community. It's a freshperspective.locals.com. It's only $4.99 per month. And if you want to ensure that I will answer a question just for you, then that's how to do it. Less than a cup of coffee once per month. It's not too shabby, y'all. But yeah, thanks for joining me here. And this was actually pretty fun. I like doing this. So I hope you guys do ask questions for me to answer. But until next time, as usual, keep your minds free.